Hey everyone, welcome to the video. In this one, we are lineup building for week 12 of the NFL season on Draftkings. Like always, this is not a guaranteed lineup I will end up using. It's just me going through my cash game process to build a lineup that makes sense for cash games and single entry GPPs. We want high owned guys that have safe floors, decently safe floors, I should say, and decently high ceilings, and like I said, high ownership. So that is the perfect formula for a cash game lineup, and we are going to go through my process for how I would build one. Anyway, before we continue, if you guys could leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out. Really appreciate it. You also follow me on Twitter at ChrisPennell16. And if you're interested in the spreadsheet I build every single week and my Discord chat that I just recently made, links in the description below for my Patreon. And let's get right into it. So, let's just start with the running back position, because that's the first thing I usually do for my cash game builds is figure out which running backs I want to build, because I think that's probably the most important thing when you're building your cash game lineups. So I want to start this week. Christian McCaffrey. It's scary, but I am personally fading Christian McCaffrey this week. I think there's better options that are much cheaper than him that have similar upside. And the Saints have been absolutely dominant versus running backs this season. Is McCaffrey going to get over 100 all-purpose yards? Yeah, probably. But he's just so expensive, and this is not a high ceiling matchup for him. Would it surprise me if he goes out and gets 30 plus points? No, but he's also 10,500. And I think Alvin Kamara versus Carolina offers you very similar upside, maybe not as safe of a floor, but he definitely has near the same ceiling as he does. Not the exact same, but pretty near so. 8,200 though. I love Alvin Kamara this week. He's my RB1 of the week when you factor in price and matchup, and I am just a huge fan of the guy. I already talked about him in my core plays video extensively. I love Alvin Kamara. He's had 20 targets the past 2 weeks, 18 receptions. He's getting 7.25 targets per game. He has a 20% target share, a 33% weighted opportunity share. Now, he's not a workhorse type back like someone like Nick Chubb that just gets 20 plus carries a game. He only gets 12 carries a game, but he's also 12th in touches per game because of his heavy involvement in the passing game, and he's very efficient with his touches. His touches don't equal other people's touches. When he gets touches, he's very efficient with it, and he can make it really. He's just an explosive running back. He makes explosive plays. So, him getting 12 touches is much worth more than someone like Adrian Peterson getting 25 touches. I would take 12 touches from Alvin Kamara more than I would take 25 touches from Adrian Peterson on most days. And like I said, he's elite involvement in the passing game, which is great for PPR scoring, because, if you're going to give me 10 targets as a running back, and it's not like that's just an outlier. 8 targets versus Jacksonville, 7 versus Tampa, 3 versus Dallas sucked, then 10 versus Seattle, 3 versus the Rams. That's when Teddy Bridgewater came in randomly during the game, so I kind of threw out Alvin Kamara. And then versus Houston, he had, 8 targets. So the guy is heavily involved in the passing game. He's a part-time receiver, and he's an excellent running back. I saw a stat from Field Yates on Twitter today that he is number 1. When he's given the ball, he has an 88% success rate of gaining yards, which is tops in the league. So Alvin Kamara, the guy is awesome. And this is a great matchup versus Carolina. They are 32nd DVOA versus the run, dead last, and they're allowing 28.6 points per game to running backs, which is 5th most in the NFL. And they have he has the second best offensive line versus defensive line run blocking matchup of the week. Alvin Kamara, he's my RB1, and he better go off because he's in my season-long leagues as well. So I love Alvin Kamara this week. Expect him to be the highest owned running back. So let's just plug him in. And now for my RB2, there's a lot of ways you can go this week. I like Le'Veon Bell here. He is 6,400, and he's going up against the Oakland Raiders. Now, he's been horribly inefficient. He's the opposite of Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara is an efficient running back. Le'Veon Bell, not so much. He's only averaging 50 yards per game and only 3.1 yards per carry, which is awful. Like Nick Chubb's over 5 yards per carry, and so is Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook. So Le'Veon Bell has been almost half that. But he's getting 21.8 touches per game, which is 7th most in the NFL, 16.1 rushing attempts per game, which is 10th in the NFL, and 5.7 targets per game, which is 10th among running backs. He's had 3 nice games in a row. He had 17 versus Washington, 16 versus New York, and 20 versus Miami, getting about 17.5 carries per game in that span. Has had 2 touchdowns as well. And he had 9 targets versus Miami, 4 versus New York, and 2 versus Washington. But they were winning those games versus New York and Washington. And he's just too cheap this week given his talent. I know his talent really hasn't shown up this season, but the guy's a good running back. He's got volume, and he's got a good matchup. In Oakland, they're allowing 25.7 points per game to running backs, which is 14th most, which is more middle of the pack. And then Oakland is 22nd DVOA versus the run, which is near the bottom of the pack. And he's game script proof. If they fall behind, he's a good play. If they get ahead, he's a good play. Problem is, he hasn't really been much. The Jets kind of struggled to get into the end zone, but they've scored 34 points the past 2 weeks, so that's nice. So, if they can keep that going versus Oakland, one of the worst defenses in the league, yeah, and Sam Darnold's look a little bit better, I think Le'Veon Bell should have a pretty decent game here. I expect him to be popular. He's probably going to be most people's RB2 or RB3 this week. So Le'Veon Bell, I think he makes for a fantastic play. And then as for my flex spot, I'm going to use a running back there. And so earlier in the week, I wasn't that heavy on Derrick Henry because I'm just personally not a big Derrick Henry fan. I don't know what it is, but I'm not. But I understand the guy has been amazing this season. I'm not being biased. The guy's been great. I can't deny that. And this is just a really good matchup versus Jacksonville. So I think he's going to be my RB3 this week, or RB2, whatever. Bell, Kamara, and Derrick Henry are going to be my top 3 running backs this week. And he has been great the past 2 weeks, especially. He had 23 carries versus Kansas City, which was a great matchup. 188 yards, popped off that 68-yard touchdown, had 2 targets, 2 catches for 3 yards, but 36 fantasy points. Then versus Carolina, one of the other best matchups in the league, the matchup Kamara's going with, he had 13 carries for 63 yards, got into the end zone though, had 3 targets, 3 catches, 36 yards, and a receiving touchdown, good for 24 fantasy points. And he's been good. 8 points versus Tampa. That's a really tough matchup. Versus the Chargers, 17.8. Denver, not so much, 4.3, but then 13, 14, 11, 17, 28. He's been pretty consistent. Now, he's not going to be a big factor in the passing game. But I think they're just going to run the ball against Jacksonville. They are 30th DVOA versus the run. And they're allowing, I believe, 26 points per game to running backs. I know it's like bottom 10. So Derrick Henry, he should be fine here. And he's just so big. It's hard to tackle the guy. It's late in the season. That's what they did last year. Late in the season, they just rode Derrick Henry. I think they do the same here. So Derrick Henry, I think he's a fine play as your RB3 or RB2 this week. 6,900. Not a big factor in the passing game, but I think he can get you multiple rushing touchdowns and get over 100 yards on the ground. He's going to see 20-plus touches. So Derrick Henry, I do like him this week. I got higher on him as the week went on. So these are my 3 running backs for cash this week, more than likely. I think Miles Sanders is a fine option as well. I believe he's 5,000. The only thing I was concerned about with Miles Sanders is that Jay Ajayi is expected to have a notable role. Whatever the heck that means, I don't know. I can't trust coaches these days. They say people are going to play, they don't play. They say they're going to have big roles, they get 2 targets. You never know, but last week Miles Sanders, he had 85% of the snaps. I expect that to go down a little bit, but I think Miles Sanders is still a fine option. He's only 5,000, and I do think he's definitely in play. He's a good pass catcher. He had 4 targets last week, but New England sold out to stop Miles Sanders in the passing game last week, but at only 5K, I do think he's a fine option if you want to spend down a little bit at your RB3 or RB2 spot. So keep Miles Sanders in consideration. Also think Philip Lindsay is a decent option as well, going up against that bad Buffalo run defense. Nick Chubb's a fine option as well. And then Kareem Hunt more so in GPPs. And then I think Jalen Samuels is a fine GPP play as well. He's just a little expensive. So we got our 3 running backs, and that's where I like to start. And all 3 running backs have 20-plus touch upside is what I like. So we got 60-plus touch potential here. That's a hard trio of words to say. 60-plus touch potential here. And they all got high ceilings. Le'Veon Bell, maybe not so much, but I think he's a very safe play. And all these guys are going to be heavily involved. So I like the 3 running backs we have. So now we have 47.50 left per lineup. We're going to have to go cheaper at quarterback, I'm going to assume. I'd love to get Matt Ryan in going up against Tampa Bay. It's obviously an excellent matchup versus Tampa Bay. We all know that. I expect them to be popular. They're not going to be able to run the ball. But I can't afford him. I just can't do it. So if I plug in Matt Ryan, I got 4,300 left. I mean, it's doable, but I want some high-end receivers this week. So I think I'm going to drop down. I think Baker's a fine play as well. I almost went with Baker, but I think Carson Wentz, I think he's a good cash game option this week going up against Seattle. Now, he has not been great. 13, 15, 14, 9. That's bad. 24 versus Minnesota was nice. Then 12, 19, 21, 19, 28. Those are some pretty decent games there. So this is pretty much just a price and matchup play, and there is a lot of low totals on this slate, but this one's actually not surprisingly, but decently high at 28 total. 48 point over under, which is second highest on the slate, only to the Tampa Bay Atlanta game. And the Eagles also have a 25-point team total this week, so that's very decent. That's decently high as well. And he's priced right around guys like Mason Rudolph. Let me see. Mason Rudolph, Jeff Driscoll, who I think Jeff Driscoll's a fine play as well, so no slander to him. But Nick Foles, Daniel Jones, Sam Darnold, and Kyle Allen's only, 400 cheaper than him. So he's in a price range where I think he should be at least a little bit more expensive. So at 5,600, I do think he's pretty solid here. Now, he's only had 1 multiple touchdown game since week 5, which is rough. But it's a good matchup versus Seattle. They're allowing 21 points per game to quarterbacks, which is 10th most in the league. They also had a long stretch of allowing a top 10 quarterback performance for like a long stretch of weeks. Seattle was also 18th DVOA versus the pass, allowing 285 yards per game. This game has sneaky shootout potential, and I think he makes a great cash game quarterback if we can't get it to Matt Ryan, and that's the case as of right now. So I'm going to drop down to Carson Wentz here. He's about 1,100 cheaper than Matt Ryan. I think Carson Wentz can get you 18 to 20 points. I think Matt Ryan can get you anywhere from 20 to 25 points. So I do like the value we get with Carson Wentz here. And if this game shoots out, like I think it's got the potential to, I think we're going to be looking pretty good at 5,600 for Carson Wentz. So now at this point, we have 45.80 left. So it's actually not too bad. It's not too bad. Now, Julio Jones, I love Julio Jones, but hear me out. In this lineup example, we cannot get to him. I think he's the number one cash game wide receiver in the week. Don't get me wrong. I think he's the number one play at wide receiver. But in this example, we cannot get to him. But I do think I have a sufficient backup plan to not having Julio Jones. But we will talk about that in a little bit. But if you want to hear my takes on all the players that I'm not going to go over. I did my core plays video yesterday. It's going over pretty much my entire player pool besides a couple guys that I added today. But so just keep in mind that you can go back and watch that video. But so my wide receiver one in this lineup is going to be Odell at 7,000. I think he's an excellent play this week. We get how much is Julio Jones? 8,000. Yeah, so we get 1,000 savings with Odell here. Now I know it doesn't feel great because he's not been great, but this has to be the week he goes off. It has to be, right? I mean, I don't see how he doesn't. The volume's there. 26% target share, 38% market share of the team's air yards, and 66% weighted opportunity share. It just has not amounted to much. He had 10 targets last week versus Pittsburgh, 12 targets versus Buffalo. He's heavily involved. It just hasn't done much. Him and Baker are not on the right. They don't have the right chemistry at the moment, something like that. But he's had double-digit points in all but 2 weeks this season. So, 10, 10, 13, 10, 19, 6 versus San Francisco, 4 versus Baltimore. But then 11, 31, 14. He hasn't been as bad as people think. I mean, he's involved. He's been double-digit points. He's only 7,000. It feels, I say only because he's been in the 6K range, but it still feels a little cheap for Odell. He's going up against Miami without Xavier Howard. Their defense is awful anyway with Xavier Howard, but it at least helps that, their top corner's not there. And he wasn't great this season, but, they just have no one. John Brown just absolutely murdered this team last week. And if you're just talking about talent-wise, I'm taking Odell every single day over John Brown. No disrespect to John Brown. He's been great this year, but, give me Odell. And the Browns should be able to put up points this week. They got a 28-point team total, which is near league high. Miami's 32nd DVOA versus the pass. Dead last. It does not get better than this. And I just think one of the top stacks this week is pairing Baker with Odell. And you can run it back with Devontae Parker. And for cash games, I'm not necessarily looking to stack. But Odell, he's a fantastic option this week. I think he gets into the end zone. He has 1 touchdown this year, and that was all the way back in, week 2 versus the Jets. Where he broke off an 89-yard slant and took it to the house. I think Odell's a good play here. I have flashbacks of the Monday night game, or was it was either Thursday night or Monday night, where Odell just went off versus Miami. He took that slant to the house, and then he had that toe drag in the back right corner of the end zone, I think. So Odell at 7K, I think he's a fine play. He doesn't absolutely break the bank. I'd prefer Julio, but I can't get him to fit. And like I said, I have a sufficient backup plan for not playing Julio, and that's because we're going to play his teammate Calvin Ridley at 6,500. I think he's a fantastic option. I think he's a pretty nice pivot off of Julio if you can't afford Julio. He gets a boost in this offense. Mohamed Sanu got traded. Austin Hooper is out. So, Calvin Ridley definitely is going to be a much bigger factor in this offense. Last week, he had 8 targets, 8 catches, 143 yards, 1 touchdown, good for 31.8 fantasy points. Defenses are going to want to sell out to stop Julio Jones. I'm not saying Julio Jones is a bad play. He's the number 1 play at wide receiver this week. But I'm sure Tampa Bay is going to want to at least care a little bit more about Julio Jones, so maybe Calvin Ridley runs a little bit free, sees some softer coverage, and the guy's talented. He's a former first-round pick, so it's not like he's just some new receiver coming into a new wide receiver 2 role with, other guys being out. And like I said, with Julio, this is a fantastic matchup. Tampa is getting absolutely abused through the air right now. This should be a pass-heavy attack for Atlanta. We all know they do not have a run game. Brian Hill is not great. Tampa Bay's run defense is excellent. They're elite versus the run, the best DVOA team versus the run this season. I've top 5 in fewest points allowed per game to running backs. They're not going to be able to run the ball. They are going to pass the ball a lot. This is the highest over-under of the slate at 51 points. Points are going to be scored in this game, I imagine. I know it's a divisional game, but Atlanta's going to be throwing the ball quite a bit. It wouldn't surprise me if this turns into a track meet at home in the Dome. And, there's just not a lot of exciting games on this slate, so I want players and high over-unders, and Calvin Ridley fits the bill, and he's 1,500 cheaper than Julio Jones, and he's got similar upside too. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he outscored him at lower ownership. So Calvin Ridley at 6,500. We don't have Julio Jones, which scares me mightily, so I'm going to go with this team at Calvin Ridley and hope to get some of those Matt Ryan points. So now at this point, we have 3,100 left, which doesn't look like a lot, and it's not a lot. So wide receiver 3, I think there's a new play that opened up for me. So it's going to be N'Keal Harry at 3,300. So Mohamed Sanu, he's out, and then Philip Dorsett has not been cleared for, either contact or practice or something like that. And it's Saturday, so he's not playing. So that's going to be Julian Edelman, N'Keal Harry, and Jacoby Myers, and I will take N'Keal Harry every single day of the week over Jacoby Myers. This guy was a high draft pick. The guy's good. He was good in college. He played 32 of the 74 snaps last week versus the Eagles. He had 4 targets, 3 catches, 4.8 points. Not great, but he's dirt cheap. He's 3,300. It's a tougher matchup going up against Dallas, but I think he's going to get involved. I think he gets 5 to 7 targets here, and he's dirt cheap. He's in a good offense. No, I shouldn't say he's in a good offense. It's in a perceived good offense, but he's in a good system, I should say, with Bill Belichick. He should be able to scheme him open. I know Tom Brady's dealing with the elbow injury, but he should be good to go. And he's dirt cheap. The guy's talented. I'll take a shot there at 3,300. I think he's fine. He's more of a riskier play, but to fit in guys like Odell, Calvin Ridley, Kamara, Bell, Henry, we have to take at least maybe one risk. Although I don't think it's the worst risk in the world either, because I think he's going to be involved. He's dirt cheap. So N'Keal Harry, we will take a shot at him, and I've seen some sites have him some high ownership, so he might end up being the chalk wide receiver 3 for your punts. Earlier in the week, I was on Tim Patrick a little bit. I think Russell Gage is a fine option as well, but N'Keal Harry's looking pretty good at that dirt cheap price tag. And as for my defense, we have 30-50 left. I'm plugging in the Denver defense this week. I think they make a lot of sense. So it's the lowest total of the slate. I believe it's like 36.5 last time I looked. It's below 40. It's going to be a low scoring game, and I know Josh Allen looked great last week, but I don't like just absolutely steer away from the guy. I mean, the guy's a good fantasy quarterback, but Broncos defense has been tough this year. They've been great versus the pass, good versus the run. I don't see this game having a lot of points. Wouldn't surprise me if it's like 13-10 at the end of the game, 17-10, something like that. So I think the Broncos defense is a really good option, and I do think they're going to be the highest owned defense of the week. Now, at this point, we have 3,700 left, which is absolutely perfect because I like to get a pass catcher with my quarterback. I know I don't like stacking in cash, but if I think Wentz does good, I have to think one of his guys does good. And I like Dallas Goedert here at 3,700. So if we can't afford Zach Ertz, I said earlier in the week, just take half the price and go with Dallas Goedert here. He's the generic brand version of Zach Ertz, but honestly, the generic brand version of things aren't too bad. Since week 6, he's had 9.8 points. 15.9, 11.2, 7.9, and 12.6. Not too bad for someone that's consistently in this 3K range. He used to be in the 2K range. Unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. But he played 81% of the snaps last week. He's getting 5.6 targets per game. He had 3 touchdowns in that span. And this is a good matchup versus Seattle. They're allowing they're a bottom 10 team versus tight ends, allowing 14.2 points per game, which is 8th most in the league. So Dallas Goedert, I think he's a fine play, and he fits the lineup pretty good because we get that Carson Wentz, Dallas Goedert combo. So I think this is a way you can go for cash games. I'm not saying I'm going to absolutely use this. I just built this morning, and I was like, this is a pretty decent cash game build, and it makes sense. It's a nice process of going through it. Everything made sense. I'm not saying you got to use it or anything. But I think this lineup makes sense for cash games. So we went with Carson Wentz. We can't afford Matt Ryan without dropping someone like Odell or Kamara, which I don't feel comfortable doing, and I think Wentz can at least hang with Matt Ryan. I don't think he's got the same ceiling, but I think he can hang with him. So we got Carson Wentz at 5,600. It's a high total. He's playing at home. We got Kamara going up against Carolina, my number 1 running back of the week. We got Le'Veon Bell, 6,400. I think he's one of the best value running backs of the week. I shouldn't say he's a value running back, but I think he's one of the best values at running back this week because at 6,400 just seems a little bit too cheap. We got Odell. I think he's going to break out in this game versus Miami. I think it's got to come here. Calvin Ridley, he is my pivot off of Julio in this lineup. I really wish I had Julio, but I don't, so I'm going to grab his teammate going up against Tampa, who I think has similar upside. N'Keal Harry is very, very cheap, 3,300. No Dorsett, no Sanu. He's going to be the wide receiver 2. Dallas Goedert, we can't afford Zach Ertz, so we're going to drop down a little bit with Dallas Goedert, who I think has similar upside. He doesn't have the same floor as Zach Ertz does, but he's got similar upside. Then Derrick Henry, I think he's going to run all over Jacksonville. Wouldn't surprise me, over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. And the Broncos defense, they're going to be popular. They're cheap. It's a low total. They're playing on the road, which I wish they were at home. But 2,400 is not too bad for the Broncos defense. So anyway, guys, I'm going to leave you with that. Remember, I'm not saying go use this lineup. I'm not sure if I'm even going to use this lineup, but this is a good process to go through making your cash games. You can use the same process to make your own lineups. And check out my core plays video that I posted yesterday. It's got pretty much my entire player pool there. I do update stuff throughout the week, so that's going to be all in my spreadsheet. Like I said, links available in the description below. In my Discord, you can chat it up with me all day. I don't do much besides fantasy sports and then go into the Y every day. So that's about it. So I will message you back all day. And I'm going to leave you guys with that. I'll see you guys in the next video. Wish you guys the best of luck, and hope you guys have a great main slate tomorrow or today whenever you're watching this. And hit that subscribe button.